Welcome! Today we're going to break down the core ideas from James Clear's incredible book, Atomic Habits. We're going to map out a simple plan for building good habits and, maybe more importantly, ditching the bad ones for good. But first, I want you to look at this number, 37.78. What on earth could that mean? It might look totally random, but trust me, it's the secret key to unlocking huge transformations in your life. Just keep it in the back of your mind because we're definitely coming back to it. You know, we all tend to believe that massive success demands massive action. We put all this pressure on ourselves to make some huge overnight change that'll get everyone's attention. But the funny thing is, that approach almost never works. The real power, the real secret, is in the tiny gains you barely even notice. To really get this, let's look at the amazing story of British cycling. For about 100 years, they were, well, pretty mediocre. I mean, their performance was so bad that one of the top bike manufacturers in Europe actually refused to sell them bikes because they were worried it would hurt their brand. But in 2003, that all changed. They hired a guy named Dave Brailsford as their new performance director. And he came in with this super simple but totally revolutionary idea he called the aggregation of marginal gains. And when I say they went deep with this, I mean they went deep. This wasn't just about tweaking bike seats or testing tires. No. They hired a surgeon to teach the riders the right way to wash their hands to cut down on colds. They tested which massage gels led to the fastest muscle recovery. They even painted the inside of the team's truck pure white just so they could spot tiny bits of dust that might mess with the bikes. So what happened? Well, the results were just unbelievable. Only 5 years after Brailsford started, the team completely dominated at the 2008 Olympic Games. Over the next decade, British cycling had one of the most successful runs in the history of the sport, and it all came from that simple commitment to getting just 1% better. And that brings us right back to our mystery number. This is the math behind it all. If you can get just 1% better at something every single day, by the end of the year, you'll be nearly 38 times better. It's basically compound interest, but for your life. Okay, so the British cycling story is super inspiring, right? But how do we actually apply this to our own lives? Well, first, we've got to understand how our habits actually work under the hood. And it's not about willpower or motivation. It's about a simple, predictable process happening in our brains. Every single thing we do, whether it's making coffee first thing in the morning or scrolling through our phones when we should be working, it's all driven by the exact same 4-step pattern in our brains. And once you see this pattern, you can start to use it to your advantage. It's called the habit loop. Here's how it works. First, you get a cue. That's the trigger that kicks the whole thing off. That cue creates a craving, which is the motivation or desire. The craving leads to a response. That's the actual habit. And finally, you get a reward, which scratches that itch and tells your brain, hey, remember that. Let's do it again. Let's make this super real. Think about your phone. The buzz in your pocket? That's the cue. That immediate little urge to know what the notification is? That's the craving. You grabbing your phone and opening the app? That's the response. And the relief of satisfying your curiosity? That's the reward. This whole loop happens in like half a second, totally on autopilot. So if every single habit follows that same basic playbook, that means we can create a simple framework to change them. And James Clear gives us this amazing toolkit he calls the 4 laws of behavior change. It's a really practical way to take back control of that loop. It's brilliant because each law targets one step of the loop. So for a good habit, first you make the cue obvious, like leaving your gym shoes right by the front door. Second, you make the craving attractive. Maybe you pair it with something you love, like only listening to your favorite podcast when you're on a walk. Third, you make the response easy. You lower the friction, like packing your gym bag the night before. And finally, you make the reward satisfying. You give yourself a little win, like putting a big X on your calendar after you do it. Now here's where it gets really cool. To break a bad habit, you just invert the laws. You flip them upside down. You make the cue invisible. Hide the cookies on the highest shelf in the pantry. You make the craving unattractive by really thinking about the downsides. You make the response difficult. Maybe you unplug the TV and hide the remote in another room. See, it's not about a battle of willpower. It's about redesigning your world to make the bad habits harder and the good habits easier. Okay, this all sounds great in theory, but let's be real. The hardest part is just getting started, right? That initial push is where most of us fail. So what's the secret? Well, it's all about what you do in the first 2 minutes. The rule couldn't be simpler. Whatever new habit you want to start, you shrink it down until the first step takes less than 2 minutes. So read more becomes read 1 page. Do yoga every day becomes roll out my yoga mat. The whole point is to make it so easy to start that you can't possibly say no. So here's how you scale it down. Your huge goal might be to run a marathon. That's a lot. But the 2-minute version, it's just putting on your running shoes. That's it. This tiny action is what the book calls a gateway habit. It doesn't seem like much, but it's the on-ramp to the bigger behavior. And that gets right to the heart of it. The goal isn't to run a 5K on day 1. The goal is to master the art of showing up. Once you're consistently putting on your shoes, going for a 1-minute walk seems easy. You're building the identity of someone who doesn't miss workouts. And that identity shift, that's what makes habits stick for good. So at the end of the day, the power of these so-called atomic habits isn't found in one massive change. It's in the compound effect of hundreds of tiny 1% improvements over time. So I'll just leave you with this question. What's one tiny 2-minute gateway habit you can start today to get that ball rolling?